Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's me, Rocco, again. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. It's always a pleasure to review some albums for you guys, and for myself as well. I enjoy this. Today we're going to be taking a look at an album from a band I haven't touched on yet. I'm always trying to touch on different bands. I have my favorites. I have my core bands that I'm going to review multiple albums for, and even eventually entire discographies. But I do want to kind of expand my horizons and touch a wider audience of people. So today we're going to be taking a look at one of my all-time favorite discoveries of 2020, an album by the band Blue Oyster called Secret Treaties. It was their third album, released in 1974. And yeah, guys, this album slipped under the radar for me for many years. I'm a huge hard rock, huge classic rock fan. I love like progressive rock, metal, jazz fusion, all those more, intense genres, but I'm a huge fan of hard rock and classic rock just as much. And I was surprised because Blue Oyster Cult, they have that huge hit song. We all know the one, guys. Don't Fear the Reaper, played on the radio all the time. But they're one of those fucking bands where it seems like not a lot of people like delve deep into them and listen to their entire discography. And one day I was watching Sea of Tranquility, one of the all-time best YouTube channels to discover new music from the past or even from the present. And Pete Pardo mentioned that this was one of his favorite albums, one of his all-time favorites from the 70s. And I was thinking, like, fuck, Blue Oyster Cult, I love the song Don't Fear the Reaper. Like, why have I not gotten around to it? And that's just simply what it is. It's just a band I just haven't gotten around to yet. I'm one of those listeners that when I listen to music, when I discover a new band, I don't just hear the album once and then go on to the next thing. I really get into the albums, get obsessed with them at points. And, I can listen to an album like 10, 12 times before I even move on to the next one. That's just how I am. So it takes me a long time to get to like all these classic bands, but I am so glad I took Pete Pardo's advice from that video and listened to Secret Treaties because, man, this album here, it's got to be one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time. And it's a very unique album. And when I was making notes for this review, I was trying to think about like how I'm going to describe the sound of this album to you guys, and I realized something. It's very difficult. I mean, there's just something about this band. They're unique. They have a very distinctive sound, but it's hard to describe, and it's kind of a dilemma for reviewers when they can't describe the core sound of a band. I'm going to try my best. It's going to be tough, but needless to say, this album here took me by complete surprise. And I gotta be honest, guys, the very first time I heard this album was with my friend over Facebook. We usually listen to music, Sunday nights or whatever night we just show each other albums that we haven't heard before. And one night I was feeling something heavy. So I'm like, fuck, that Pete Pardo video. He said it's a classic, like, proto-metal hard rock album. So I was expecting something heavy. So we started listening to it. And to be honest, side one went by, and although I enjoyed the songs here and there, I was kind of disappointed because I was expecting something a lot heavier. Because I had read somewhere that these guys were like the American Black Sabbath, and I wasn't getting that at all. I still kind of don't get that. Okay, lyrically, there's something in common between them, but musically, there's a distinctive difference between them. I guess they just share heavy riffs, but don't all the early 70s hard rock bands? I don't know. But anyway, I didn't really get into it until side two with those last few tracks, and then I realized, okay, there's something more going on here. This band here has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. And the very next day, I listened to the album again, and holy fuck, guys, without those preconceived notions that the album was going to be super heavy, I enjoyed it so much, and I just got addicted that whole week. It was basically all I was listening to, and yeah, throughout I think it's been like at least a couple months now since I first heard it. I've been putting this bad boy on over and over again, and I can't wait to check out the other albums by Blue Oyster Cult, because there are tracks on this album that are just as good, if not better, than Don't Fear the Reaper. Now, I'm not going to trash Don't Fear the Reaper, because, it's easy to pick on. It's the overplayed song on the radio that we've all heard a million times. But I never get sick of it. I mean, every time I hear that song, it's fucking awesome. And so I'm not going to, say that this album is so much better than Don't Fear the Reaper, because it isn't. But it's at least of equal quality to that track. And that track is an all-time classic. So definitely love this album, Secret Treaties. I heard it is the band's best album. So even if that's true, even if they have a few other albums that at least approach this quality, I'm gonna have a fucking awesome time discovering their next few. So definitely comment down below, tell me which one I should check out next. I know their first three albums are considered the Black and White trilogy. due to the black and white album covers. So maybe I should check that out before going forth. But I know they have a lot of other cool albums based on the covers. I've seen this one, Cultosaurus Erectus, awesome album cover, and Inner Flame, or fuck, I'm forgetting the name now. Something with the flame in the title, with like those hooded figures. Just really cool looking stuff. I can't wait to dive in. So anyway, guys, without further ado, let me get into the history behind this album. It's gonna be kind of brief. I'm not an expert on Blue Oyster Cult history, but yeah, let's dive into that. All right. So the last couple days, when I was reading up on the history behind Blue Oyster Cult, I found it really interesting just how this band came into being and all the struggles they had to go through throughout basically the first 4 or 5 years of their career. I mean, this band did not hit the ground running, to say the least. But I was interested because, they are today kind of known as that one-hit wonder band with that one huge track, Don't Fear the Reaper. And I was wondering, like, were they even big in the 70s? So I went back, and I was surprised to find that after this album and the album preceding it, these guys were pretty popular in the 70s. They were playing arenas, headlining shows. So this band here wasn't a one-hit wonder in the 70s at all. But for some reason, the sands of time have not been kind to this band, like they've been kind to other bands like Sabbath and Zeppelin and things like that. And it's a shame because, more people need to discover this, because Secret Treaties is a must-listen for any rock fan. I mean, not even hard rock, just rock fans in general. And it's a shame how, the sands of time didn't really treat the band well. Now, that's not to say they were totally obscure after the 70s. They still had that kind of cult following, to say the least. And they're still going today. So they're a band that I would definitely like to see nowadays. And they still have, a few members from their early lineup intact. And that's the thing about this band. Their main lineup of the band was really stable. I mean, even from when they started in 1967, very few lineup changes. Maybe a few in 68, 69, but throughout the 70s, they had that core lineup. And it really feels like the whole band was just gelling on this album. It's just an amazing melting pot of, keyboards, heavy guitar riffs, quirky lyrics and vocals. And it just seems like these guys have been playing with each other forever. So that's what I like about this band. The solid lineup that didn't really change. A lot of those early 70s bands are notorious for just switching members and then giving every single album a different sound to it. But yeah, I like that in their history. It shows that they were, a close-knit unit. And I was also interested to find that this band here formed in, as I mentioned, 1967. We're talking 74 here, which is, 7 years after their formation. And it's only their third album, so it begs the question, what the fuck was going on? Now, here's the thing. This technically could have been their fifth album, because in 68 and 69, they did go into the studio to record albums, but for one reason or another, they were scrapped, okay? The first time they went into the studio, and this was before they were known as the Blue Oyster Cult, I believe they were still referred to as the Soft White Underbelly, which is a horrible name, by the way. They actually recorded an album, but then their lead singer kind of left the band. I forgot his name. I think it was Buchanan or something. I don't know. I can't remember. And for some reason, Elektra, their record label, just scrapped the entire album. And then again, later on in 69, they went into the studio again, and only one single of that entire album was released at the time. Now, if you really want to listen to that album, you can go ahead and listen to it. It was re-released in 2001. Can't remember the name of it, but a quick Wikipedia search will do you guys justice there. But yeah, so these guys were definitely not popular right off the bat. And that's probably due to their original sound was more psychedelia. And I guess in the late 60s, everyone was kind of doing that. Didn't really set them apart. But then when Sabbath came around, their manager, Sandy Pearlman, who I have to talk about, he's a very important figure in the band, he wanted the band to develop a heavier sound, a heavier style, and kind of become the American Black Sabbath. He's actually the one that wanted them to do that. And they definitely progressed their sound, got a lot heavier throughout their albums. With their debut in 1971, you could definitely tell, based on reviews I've read, that the psychedelia was still there. But with their second album, they really got into hard rock. And on this album here, they perfected their sound. And again, I haven't heard those first few albums, so I'm just getting this from reviews I've read. But that seems to be the consensus. So I think it's safe to say that that's the case. But yeah, really interesting stuff. And I guess one thing I have to mention, you can't really talk about this band without addressing the elephant in the room. The band's title itself, Blue Oyster Cult. I mean, what is that? I mean, it's one of the strangest, weirdest band names. But personally, I love it, and I've always loved it. I always thought it was kind of a funny, awkward name for a band. But when I found out their original name was Soft White Underbelly, I'm so happy they went with Blue Oyster Cult. It's so much cooler. But yeah, basically, their manager gave them the name, and this brings us to Sandy Pearlman, who again plays a huge role in this band's history. He was really instrumental right from the get-go, getting them gigs and everything, and writing their lyrics for them. Blue Oyster Cult is one of those bands that really borrowed from outside lyricists, most notably Sandy Pearlman. But on this album here, there's a few other ones which I'll mention. But yeah, and Sandy was huge into the occult and mysticism and all that stuff that, a lot of people seem to really be into in the late 60s, early 70s. David Bowie, Jimmy Page, just to name a few of them. And yeah, he was really into that kind of shit. And he just got the name Blue Oyster Cult from this book he was writing, or this story. And yeah, they just went with it. And apparently there's all this lore behind it. If you guys want to dive deep into the lore behind the Blue Oyster Cult, I'm sure you can. I don't have the time or patience for that stuff, but yeah, be my guest. So that's basically what it means. So not the most meaningful band title in the world, but very mystical and occult based, and that definitely comes across in the lyrics that Sandy writes for them, which are actually fantastic lyrics. So yeah, Sandy Pearlman, huge influence on the band, and really got them their start. And that's the thing, like all their albums sold progressively better and better. Their debut was okay, and then their second one sold significantly more, and this one significantly more, and then by the next one, they were playing arenas and headlining. So their career was a slow but steady climb, and they really dominated in the 70s. So that's basically how they got their name and their lyrics and everything. Now let's talk about the members of the band, which again didn't really change much. On this album, we get the classic lineup of Eric Bloom on vocals and rhythm guitar, as well as some keyboards. Not much, but anyway, he's the main vocalist on the album. We also got Buck Dharma. His real name's Donald Roser on lead guitar, and usually he sings lead vocals on a lot of the other albums, but on this album he doesn't really sing anything. And Buck Dharma is a fucked up name, but the reason he had that name is because early on in the band's career, they all had kind of nicknames to go by. It was kind of their gimmick that Sandy Pearlman created nicknames for all the band members, all kind of ridiculous names. But Buck Dharma just stuck, and from that day forth, people know him as Buck Dharma. But yeah, his real name is Donald Roser. I guess I would go for Buck Dharma as well. But yeah, he's a lead guitar player, a fantastic and, dare I say, underrated guitar player. He's a really emotional, climactic player that can also get down and dirty with some sleazy, hard rock and riffs with a lot of intensity. So fantastic player there. Then we got Alan Lanier on keys. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. On keyboards, rhythm guitar, synthesizer. But he's mostly the keys guy, plays a big role on the album. Then we got Joe Bouchard on bass and vocals, and Albert Bouchard on drums and vocals. They're brothers, by the way. And yeah, that's the lineup on this album. Before this album, before their debut album, they had a different lead singer and a different bass player, I believe, before they got Joe Bouchard into the band. But they didn't appear on any studio album, so not worth mentioning those guys. But yeah, that's your core band. And the great thing about Blue Oyster Cult is they're one of those bands where almost every single member is capable of singing lead vocals. And if you go to their next album and the ones before, you'll see that it's really a mix of lead vocals on the album. But on this one in particular, Eric Bloom really takes a stand, and only one other song is sung by a different vocalist. I think Alan Lanier, or I could be wrong. It's actually Albert Bouchard. So the drummer, he sings lead vocals on the track Dominance and Submission. Great job. But yeah, for the most part, they do share lead vocal duties a lot. And I like that about bands. Bands like Pink Floyd did that, the Beatles, obviously. And I like that. It gives a nice texture to the different songs. Uriah Heep is another one that popped into mind. And yeah, so that's pretty much the history behind this album. It's considered their greatest achievement, and I could definitely see why. It's fantastic. Now I'm going to attempt to review this thing, guys. So here we go. All right, guys, so let's review this thing. Again, very difficult. First thing I want to get off my chest is that this album here is an absolute addiction. I mean, once you get into it, guys, I'm warning you, it's hard to put down. It's just so eventful from start to finish. It has so much attitude, so much charisma and spunk to it that there's not really 1 millisecond of boredom. There's no ballads whatsoever. Now, that's not to say that this album is kind of monotone and, the same tempo throughout. It does have its ups and downs in terms of the tempo, but there's not one dull moment. I mean, there's always something interesting around the corner, whether it be an extremely catchy melody, a disturbing lyric, or a searing guitar solo, an amazing riff. There's always something to hold your attention, and it just really doesn't let go from start to finish. Just the perfect 38-minute album. And you really don't feel cheated. At the end of that album, you feel like you've gone through so much, so many amazing songs, 4 songs per side. And yeah, a lot of people say that this album is a side of two halves, where side 1 is a lot weaker than side 2. Now, I tend to disagree. My 2 favorite tracks are on side 2 of the album, but side 1 is fantastic as well. And I think that the 2 weaker songs on the album, and I say weaker relatively speaking because they're all so great, are actually on side 2. Actually, no, I take that back. One of them is, and one of them is on side 1. So I think it's a pretty balanced album. But yeah, such a great album. And at its core, this album is a hard rock album. It's not proto metal. I mean, when people say that this album compares to Sabbath, I see that with the lyrics, which we'll get into. But musically speaking, you don't have those extremely heavy, doomy guitar riffs on the album. You do get some really crunchy, chugging riffs at points, but nothing like down-tuned, doom and gloom kind of thing there. So I don't see the Sabbath resemblance, but you do get a lot of up-tempo riffs as well. So again, when people say this band might have been like a proto-thrash band, I could definitely see that on like a few songs here and there. And when I say proto-thrash, I mean really, really proto-thrash. Like, this isn't going to be like Motorhead or anything like that, where there's like a direct link. This one's more kind of like, yeah, it has those up-tempo heavy riffs, and that's kind of the only thing. But, and at its core, this album just is a hard rock album, but it's so much more. And, when you're this addicted to an album, you know that there's something more to this band than like your simple hard rock bands like AC/DC, Foreigner, Bad Company, which are all excellent, by the way. But this band has a lot more to it. And I really think that a big part of that is the lyrics of the album. Now, usually in my reviews, I don't really focus too much on the lyrics because oftentimes, the music just speaks for itself. And it does on this album as well. But the lyrics are just amazing. I mean, I love Sandy Pearlman's just over-the-top, fantastical, creepy, disturbing at points, unsettling lyrics. And the way I think about it, it's kind of like a horror B-movie when you're reading a lot of these things, like Harvester of Eyes, Career of Evil. It's just so over-the-top and, dare I say, cheesy, that it gives it kind of like a B-movie feel, and that adds a lot to the attitude of the album. But it's done so well. So whereas Black Sabbath would be more of like The Exorcist in terms of horror movies, this one would be like The Blob or like the fucking Frankenstein series, or something more campy, but campy in a good way. And the vocals have the same attitude to match that. Some absolutely quirky vocals on the album, especially on like Dominance and Submission, and a lot of the tracks after that as well. But so it's just such a fun album. You could tell these guys were just having a great time. The melodies are so strong, guys. The songwriting on this album is absolutely fantastic. I mean, just everything is memorable. All the riffs, all the melodies. It's like you hear it once and it's just immediately stuck in your head. So it's got the catchiness factor to it. And this isn't a progressive rock band, so it doesn't wander off into any, virtuoso, long instrumental sections, which is a good thing. But the band are very capable musicians. I mean, fuck, Buck Dharma's guitar solos are really moving at points. And it's crazy because at some points he's just getting down and dirty with these greasy, chugging hard rock riffs. And the next moment he just busts out this incredibly climactic and emotional solo. So fantastic there. And the keyboards also play a huge role on the album. It's really integrated into the sound with the guitar, but it's not like a Deep Purple Uriah Heep where you get like a heavy organ and guitar sound kind of superimposed. The keyboard is really just acting as, it's a main component of the sound, but it's not just like imitating the guitar or trading off with the guitar. It's just part of the core sound of the band, and it's great. You even have some great twin guitar parts on the album. Again, I mentioned the lead singer Eric Bloom plays a lot of rhythm guitar and co-lead guitar at points. And yeah, it's just really playful. I love the vocal harmonies at points. The band really, shares a lot of the lead vocals, especially on the first track. And yeah, it's just really fun. I don't know what else to say about it. But again, so many emotional, powerful, climactic moments, especially at the end of the album, with that Astronomy track at the end. Oh my god, that song just sends shivers up and down my spine. So the band can get really serious when they want to, but for the most part, they're just having a great time on the album. And I think at the end of the day, that's where the unique sound of Blue Oyster Cult really comes from. That, they didn't give a shit. They were just writing songs for themselves, just trying to have a good time first and foremost, not really pressured by anyone or a record label or the band surrounding them, because they were really one of the most unique bands. And again, no one was telling them to write socially applicable lyrics like a lot of the other bands at the time, or long instrumental passages like the progressive rock bands, or simplistic hard rock repetitive riffs that are fantastic and easy to get into, like bands like AC/DC and shit like that. They were just doing things their own way. They weren't afraid to get a little bit campy, a little bit over theatrical at points to get their point across, incorporate those fantasy lyrics into their songs, and have those emotional climactic musical moments juxtaposed with these quirky, eccentric, almost comedic vocals and lyrics and things like that. They were just throwing all this shit into the melting pot and doing what they wanted. They don't care that they put like a 6-minute piano driven track at the end of this album. They were just doing what they wanted, and didn't give any fucks whatsoever. Now, you got to respect the band for that, and it paid off very, very well for them. Absolutely love that about this album. Also, the album cover is really cool. I love that bomber, the jet in the front, which is kind of addressed throughout the album as well. And the creepy over-the-top lyrics I already mentioned. Man, I don't know. Again, I said this was going to be hard. I don't know what else to say about it. But yeah, great. And the vocals themselves, Eric Bloom, he's a great singer. He's not like, Ronnie James Dio level or Ian Gillan, those, or not Ken Hensley, what's his name? David Byron from Uriah Heep. Like, he doesn't really, like, belt it out, but I find that his vocals have this kind of quirk to it, this charm that adds to the music. Like, has a lot of attitude in his voice as well. And he can be pretty melodic too, but, he's not going to be hitting, like, insane high notes or doing all these vocal acrobatics. And that's just fine. And the rhythm section's fantastic as well. In terms of the writing on the album, the drummer actually plays a really big role in the writing. You'll see he's on a lot of the credits on this track, as well as Eric Bloom, and I think Buck Dharma's on a few. So really this whole band was just collaborating and gelling together, and it's just such a cohesive album. Again, I wouldn't really... Some people do say there's like progressive rock elements to it, and I guess you could say like, there's some weird song structures here and there, but I wouldn't call this a progressive rock album whatsoever. I mean, there's no jazz, classical influence, extended solos, just crazy song structures that change all the time. It's nothing like that, but if you want a good rock album that's just amazing from start to finish, just fantastic songwriting, I can't get that across enough. Everything on this album is just so memorable, and you just want to have a good time with some creepy B-movie kind of fun to it, this is the album for you guys. So Secret Treaties, definitely a masterpiece of the hard rock genre. Go get it right now. Alright guys, so kicking off the album, we get track 1, Career of Evil. Notably because the lyrics were actually not written by Sandy Pearlman, but by Patti Smith, who has a few classic albums. She was a punk poet, apparently, from like the punk age. And you guys know me, I'm not a huge fan of punk music, but man, her lyrics on this song are absolutely great. I love how right off the bat, the band is getting off to a campy start. I mean, you read these lyrics, and it describes exactly what you think it does. Just someone who, takes pleasure in doing evil, which is just, hilarious. And there's such classic lines as, I'd like to do your daughter in a dirt road, and I want your wife to be my baby tonight. Just, just a guy, just a scoundrel, and the music supporting it. It's very simple, but very effective, very good, and cheesy in a sense, but in a good way. It's really driven by this hypnotic guitar and organ unison, and it's a really kind of creepy hypnotic riff that goes through the entire track. And then you get the co-lead vocals from Eric Bloom, and make sure I get his name right. Let's fuck up the names here. Albert Bouchard, the drummer, and their vocals are kind of funny. They kind of have this stop and start quality to it, kind of clunky in a sense, like the just basically following the riff. But it does the song justice, and I love the little organ interludes between the verses. The chorus is really catchy as well, where right before the chorus comes in, the whole thing stops, and we just get this funky drum riff going on, and then the singer goes, "I will not apologize," and then the organs come blaring back in, and we get the chorus, "I'll make it a career of evil." It's kind of like repetitive in that sense. The band doesn't really get into any eccentric solos, but it's just a really cool song opening the album in a very eccentric and fun way. And a very catchy song. And again, the first time I heard this album, I was expecting something crushing, something heavy. And then this track came on, and it kind of made me laugh. And I'm like, oh man, like what am I getting myself into? But thankfully, the whole album isn't like this track, or if it was, this might not have been my favorite album. But as an isolated track at the beginning, it does a really good job. I would give Career of Evil an 8.5 out of 10, hands down. But I wouldn't give it anything higher than that. It's not one of my favorite tracks on the album, but it's definitely a good start. And then the album seamlessly transitions into track 2, Subhuman. This is definitely a huge highlight for me, guys. A classic song, absolutely classic. Just love it from start to finish, and one of the more emotional, one of the more powerful songs on the album, a little bit more on the serious side, but so fucking fantastic, guys. And Buck Dharma just really shines on this track. I mean, his solos are so powerful, so emotional. That the guy really plays with a lot of feel, and I find that, when you talk about like classic rock guitar players that play with a lot of feel and everything, I feel like we should be talking more about Buck Dharma, because his solos on this album are just so passionate. And yeah, the track's awesome. The lyrics, it goes without saying, written by Sandy Pearlman, they're absolutely fantastic, evoking all this imagery of this outcast, his friends left him to die, but with more of like an occult side to it, because not only is he metaphorically a subhuman, like rejected by society, but I'm pretty sure he's actually, subhuman, like some kind of mutant or, something like that. That's what I take from it. But yeah, it's a great track. And again, it just seamlessly transitions from Career of Evil, giving the album that cohesive feel. Starting off with this really haunting, almost like sleazy guitar riff with the bam, 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 kind of laid back, and the bass kicks in, picking things up. Vocals are really good as well on this section. And then before you know it, we get into what I consider the main riff of the song. This almost groovy, frantic kind of riff with that. It's a really simple riff, but really gets the job done and evokes this sense of panic and anxiety. And the vocals just mirroring that riff do the same. So fantastic. But my favorite part of the entire song is this amazing transition where the whole song just takes on a whole new feel and vibe. I think it's at the 45-second mark where it transitions from that frantic riff into this amazing, emotional, powerful section. Oh man, the guitar comes in, the piano joins. The piano hasn't been playing throughout the song yet, but it's just such this beautiful little slice of heaven, this slice of euphoria in the midst of this track. And it gets repeated quite a few times, but that's such a strong melody. And I love how seamless the transition is from the main theme of the track. Then we get a climactic Buck Dharma solo. It's absolutely fantastic, as I already mentioned. But then in the middle of the solo, the guitar playing stops, and we get back into that main riff. But then during that riff, the guitar solo builds up again from square one and gets even more climactic than the way it started. So I love how that riff kind of breaks up the solo into like two pieces, but both pieces are just so tasty. Just such a tasty solo. I can't even describe it. And a blistering solo at that. Then the song kind of wraps up with the original theme of the track and really lets that emotional part ride out. The part where the piano joins in. So yeah, Subhuman's a classic song. I mean, I can't believe that this song didn't hit me on first listen, but trust me, guys, if you stick with it, this may end up being one of your all-time favorite classic rock tunes. It's that great. I would easily give this a 9.5 out of 10. Oh yeah, then we get into one of my absolute favorites on the album. One of the funnest tracks I've ever heard in my life. Dominance and Submission. Now, it sounds like some kinky S&M stuff, and you know what? It probably is. I haven't really analyzed the lyrics, but it is such a powerful rockin' tune. I mean, I absolutely love this track. I love the frantic riff that opens up the song. It kind of runs through the entire thing. It's just a really simple riff, but just it's so powerful. You got those power chords going on there. And Albert Bouchard sings this track, and he has this, I don't know, this soulful quality to his voice, but his voice has so much attitude and so much spunk and punch to it. And it's really kind of like the star of the show on this track. He does a fantastic job. And just, I love his little quirky vocal inflections. Like, instead of singing, back in 1963, he'll sing, back in 1963. Like, he'll, like, deepen the last syllable. Again, giving it that quirky, kind of funny feel. And, it's just this really cool rockin' tune for the most part. But then before you know it, it stops and it gets into this awesome build-up section where Alba Bouchard is basically just singing dominance, submission, and then the voice box deep effect on his voice, Radio Shapirs, something like that. It's just hilarious the first time you hear it, and that gets repeated over and over again. And you notice the piano kind of building up in the background, and the guitar comes in with these sparse melodic licks, and everything just starts building up with the guitar and the piano, and just continues to build and climax, and then until we get to the part where he's just singing dominance, submission, and the band is singing the backup vocals when they're singing dominance, and he's singing submission. It's just a funny effect, and yeah, it's actually honestly the first few times I heard it, I couldn't stop laughing during this section because it's just so quirky and over the top and theatrical, but I love how it just builds. And then when it builds, it gets into this really heavy riffing at the end. That's what it climaxes to. And right after that, right when you think the song can't get any more epic, this amazing guitar solo comes in to close off the song, and it's extremely blistering. And it just shows that Buck Dharma has a lot of variety to his playing. His playing isn't always uh, like emotional and powerful. On this track here, he just cranks out a blistering hard rock solo that you gotta love. Very, very up tempo. And yeah, dominance and submission, just one of my favorites on the album for sure. Easily a 9 out of 10. I don't know if I'd give it a 9.5, but yeah, for sure a 9 out of 10. One of the best. Track number 4 on the album, and the last song on side 1, ME 262, which is the name of the German bomber that's featured on the cover of this album. Great album cover, by the way. And this track here, what can you say about it? When I've read reviews of the album, I've actually seen a lot of people single this track out as the worst song on the album. And I really don't see it. I think this song is fucking awesome. I definitely like this song better than Career of Evil. Not by a lot, but I do like it better. So I don't think it's the weakest track on the album. In fact, I think it's fucking awesome. It's just this really energetic, heavy track, but with a lot of elements of 50s rock and roll. And I love when bands from the 70s would incorporate like a little bit of 50s rock and roll here and there. Obviously, just paying tribute to their heroes of the past. And this song does it in a fantastic way. It's just an energetic track. The lyrics deal with German bombings in World War II, and the music really, really pairs well with it, to say the least. And the lyrics by Sandy Pearlman on this track, they're very dense, very specific, names of specific planes and places, and they mention Hitler and, all these German World War II references and things like that. But the way Eric Bloom sings it is just fantastic. Like, you would never think to sing these lyrics in the way he does, but he totally makes it work. Kind of reminds me of Geddy Lee interpreting Neil Peart's really dense lyrics at points and making them sound fantastic. They sound great on this song, but then when you read them out loud, you're reading words like Luftwaffe and all these German things, and you're like, holy shit, I didn't even realize he was saying that, but he is. But yeah, great song. Starts off with an awesome hard rockin' riff. There's honky tonk piano. The vocals are great. Really your standard fare. But what I really love about this track is when this extremely heavy riff comes in. Again, this riff here has nothing to do with 50s rock and roll. This is straight out of, the early proto-metal scene. That dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. And I love the line when he sings, like some heavy metal fruit. That's such a great melody there. And there's some great harmonies too. Again, the band is really harmonizing on this track. And I love the chorus of that. So, it goes through that kind of pattern, verse, chorus, like your standard hard rock tune. But then we get this awesome midsection where we get the sound of a bomb exploding, a marching troops chanting in the background like it's some Hitler rally of years long gone, and then we get into this awesome musical representation of air warfare in World War II, where we get this air raid siren going, and the whole band is just riffing over that, and it's just really doomy, and not really in the sense of Black Sabbath, but well, I guess it does kind of remind me of War Pigs with the air raid siren, but it has this feeling of impending doom, like you're under lockdown, and no pun intended, and there's, planes flying above you, waiting to drop bombs or heavy metal fruit any second, just ending your life in a flash. Just a great middle section right there. And the ending of the track wraps things up with the original verses and choruses, and the air raid siren comes back in later. Just a really, really cool song. I really enjoy it. I would give it a 9 out of 10. And sure, this is probably like one of the more straightforward tracks on the album, but there's nothing against that. I mean, that's a good thing. And great album side. Now, flipping over the album to side 2, we get one of the more eccentric tracks on the album, KG Cretins. And I know that's a weird song title, but yeah, the lyrics on this album are notable for not being written by Sandy Pearlman, but by Richard Meltzer, who was one of the original rock and roll music critics. So I don't know, they must have collaborated with him. But yeah, he wrote some pretty creepy B-movie style lyrics for the track. But it's a really good song. Again, at first it sounds kind of campy and, kind of along the lines of Career of Evil at this point. But it gets really powerful and really intense later on in the track. And I love how the song really experiments with some nice tempo changes here and there, just shaking things up. So there's definitely more to this song that meets the eye. Again, starts off with a pretty memorable guitar and keyboard-driven riff, really united as one. And then we get the classic harmonies. Ooh, KG, what you done? Again, very eccentric B-movie like vocals. Then the lead singer Eric Bloom comes in, does a pretty good job. But holy shit, guys, there's one point where he just starts belting it out, and you're like, holy shit, I wasn't expecting this. So again, this band here isn't afraid to put some powerful moments in these seemingly lighthearted songs, and it's really great. And we even get a searing Buck Dharma guitar solo at the 1 minute 35-second mark. It just comes out of nowhere, it just kicks your ass. At 2 minutes, we get this awesome tempo change, and it gets into this pretty ominous guitar and piano-driven section. The piano here sounds really mechanical and really sinister as well. And we get this weird vocal section as well, with this eccentric ending where he just shouts out, "Look so lonely in the state of Maine," and then like a classic, again, 50s rock and roll guitar solo or guitar riff right there. Just some really over-the-top theatrical stuff. But yeah, really cool. I really like the track. If I probably had to pick a least favorite, it would be down to this one and Career of Evil. I think I like Career of Evil a little bit better than this track, but it's tough to say. Musically, I think this track might be a bit better, but I'm still going to give it an 8.5. Very strong song. Just compared to the rest, falls a little bit short, but great tune. Ooh, this next track here means business, guys. The second track on side 2, Harvester of Eyes. Incredible song. I really like this. The first time I heard this album, this was the first track, again, that really grabbed me by the balls and made me think, holy shit, there's more to this album that meets the eye. Harvester of Eyes is a heavy, bluesy song. Again, the lyrics here were written by Richard Meltzer, that same music critic who wrote KG Cretins. And it's a very creepy song lyrically, and very good fantasy lyrics here with this guy who harvests eyes, maybe a murderer or some kind of, creature from the deep. Who the fuck knows? You can interpret it any way you want, but it's a creepy song nonetheless. But the music is freaking awesome here. I love the bluesy chugging riff that goes through the entire song. It really shows how this band took advantage of Eric Bloom's rhythm guitar playing, because on top of that, Buck Dharma plays some blistering solos. And there's even some incredible twin guitar moments as well that remind you of stuff like the Allman Brothers and, what's that band called? The Allman Brothers, the fucking Thin Lizzy, those bands that did the twin guitar in the early 70s. Needless to say. But yeah, great track there. And I just love the vocals. They're very punchy. They got a lot of attitude to them. Very theatrical. And during the chorus, it's very melodic. I mean, you get this melodic kind of building guitar in the background from Buck Dharma. Some great harmonies in the background. Just a really uplifting section there between the more bluesy, kind of dirty, greasy verse sections, which are really great. Then I mentioned there's a great solo again, 1 minute 44 seconds. Buck Dharma just comes sliding in with this incredibly bluesy but blistering solo. It's just crazy all over the place stuff, and you still got that hypnotic dun, 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 just chugging along in the background. Top notch shit right there. And then at the end of that solo, climaxes into that epic twin guitar part before getting back into the main groove. But what I love about this is it doesn't just simply reprise the beginning of the song. We get these creepy background vocals with the echo effect. Harvester of Eyes. Really has that creepy feel. And they really let that ride out. And then right when you think the song is going to end at the 3 minute 30-second mark, we get an awesome transition to this extremely doomy riff. And now, I've said this band was compared to Sabbath. They were like the American Sabbath. And I disagreed with that. But this last minute of the track, I totally see the Sabbath influence there. It's extremely chugging, doomy, heavy, almost like proto-stoner metal or stoner rock. And it's awesome. And you got Eric Bloom just singing these eccentric kind of scat vocals over the whole thing. Like, it just sounds absolutely insane. Like they just released the guy from a mental institution. But again, it's so bluesy and doomy, and Just a very nice way to close the track on an ominous note. But actually, that it doesn't close the track. Now, I don't know if this is a transition, if it's the beginning of the next song or the end of this one, but we get this random musical box kind of kids music coming in, and at first I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? It's such a weird transition, but now I kind of like it. It adds to the creepy atmosphere of the whole track, and I think I do consider it kind of the outro of this song because the next song is something completely different. So yeah, this track here really experimenting with the changes, and it's not a very straightforward song whatsoever. So, musically speaking, this song's probably the best on the album so far. But I still think I like Subhuman a little bit better. So I'm going to keep it at a 9 instead of a 9.5. But this album ends very strong with this track and the next two afterwards. Absolute fucking masterpiece, guys. The next two tracks on this album just blow everything else on the album just out of the water. Well, maybe not Subhuman, but really these last two tracks are just, in my opinion, milestones of the entire hard rock genre. And the whole album's been fantastic so far, don't get me wrong. But these tracks here are just in a whole different ballpark for me. Flaming Telepaths and Astronomy, definitely two tracks that should be listened to back to back for reasons that I'll get into later. But man, Flaming Telepaths is such a powerful, emotional track. Very mystical, kind of haunting lyrics, but the band puts a lot of passion and emotion into them. And they sing these lyrics with such conviction that you just feel something deep down within it. It's just such a rocking tune, but has so many climaxes and, elements that weren't really on any other tracks on the album, most notably the synthesizer. And it's just one of those amazing songs. I love how it starts off, just right off the bat, coming out of that doomy outro of Harvester of Eyes, with this awesome driving guitar with this like simplistic but hypnotic piano playing in the background. That's just, it has this drive to it. It has this force to it, this driving force. And then before you know, we get these amazing backing vocals with the ooh, with the harmonies in the background. And Eric Bouchard comes in, Eric Bloom comes in with a fantastic vocal line there. Just great lyrics. I love when he sings the line, "I've opened up my veins too many times." And that really like evokes imagery of doing heroin and everything. But I think this song literally means like, opening veins, like killing people. And I don't know, it's just one of those weird Blue Oyster Cult songs. I don't really want to analyze the lyrics too much, but they're fantastic. But then when it gets into the chorus, it's just so powerful with the heavy guitar riffs that get climactic all of a sudden, and some awesome emotional guitar licks there, just absolutely fantastic. And it goes that way throughout like the first 2 minutes of the track. Then before you know it, this amazing wash of synthesizers just bursts through like a wall of power. Kind of like, I don't know, kind of reminds me of Fly on a Windshield by Genesis. It doesn't sound as Middle Eastern, but it has that force that just breaks through. Feels like this music is like the sun bursting through the clouds. And it's such a powerful moment. It doesn't last really long. This isn't a progressive rock band where they would extend this synth section to like 2-3 minutes in length, but it really gets the job done, just having that powerful climax right there. Then the piano takes over, and right when you think it can't get any better, Buck Dharma comes in with, by far my favorite guitar solo on the whole album. It's just so emotional, so powerful, and almost like apocalyptic at the end. It just sounds like the sky's falling in on you, the whole world's gonna end. And it gets very, very intense, a very intense solo. Then right after that solo, gets back into the verses. And it's just such a satisfying transition because the melody is just so strong on this track. And the outro is really something to behold. At the 4-minute, 20-second mark, when he sings, "And the joke's on you," that part there just keeps getting repeated over and over again for the last minute. And Buck Dharma just comes in with this amazing guitar solo that just builds and builds and builds along with the music, and it just gets so intense and electrifying. Your mind's literally about to explode. I guess that's where the title Flaming Telepaths comes from, but you really don't know where the song's going to go, and then it just abruptly ends. That's right, it's one of those abrupt endings to tracks that usually annoy the fuck out of me. And when I heard this for the first time, it annoyed the fuck out of me because I was just getting so into it. I mean, it's such an overwhelming outro, and for it to end and get into this kind of laid-back piano section, the first time you listen to it, it's going to be disappointing. But man, over time, let me tell you guys, out of all the songs that end abruptly like this transition works the best so far. And now it doesn't even bother me because I know when it's going to happen. And for some reason it doesn't bother me, and I can't tell you why. I can't tell you what it is, because songs that do this, like for example, "Pull Me Under" by Dream Theater, that just abruptly end, it irritates me. I don't think songs should abruptly end when you least expect them, but for some reason, Flaming Telepaths gets away with it. So I don't know what their secret is, but anyway, guys, such an incredible, incredible song. Fucking 10 out of 10, hands down. I mean, this song is just extremely addictive. One of the most satisfying hard rock songs you could possibly imagine. And the album doesn't let off any steam here, guys, because the last track is arguably even better. Right, guys, so closing off this album, we get the incredible track, Astronomy. I think it's unanimous at this point that this track here is regarded as the best song on the album. Every single album review I've read has praised it as that, and I do think it's definitely the best, if not the second best. I would probably say I still like Flaming Telepaths just slightly better than this song, but for totally different reasons. This track here is just trance-like, hypnotic, and mystical, but it has so many uplifting choruses and just powerful emotions running through the entire track that it's really more than that. So, it's tempting to say this is the ballad of the song. The main melody is piano-driven, but man, when it kicks into high gear, it kicks into high gear, guys. And it's just such a great song, such a mystical track, and a perfect way to close the album. It's also the longest song on the album, clocking in at, I think, 6.5 minutes. So, a little bit more on the epic length compared to the songs that came before it, but amazing track here. And everyone's on top of their game. Again, the piano really drives the song. It just starts off with this amazing, haunting, beautiful piano melody. It's just, you just lie and let it just wash over you. It's just an amazing, warm feeling. And then Eric Bloom comes in with his fantastic vocals, just extremely melodic section of the song, almost like too melodic for this album. Like, this shouldn't exist on the same album that made as cagey cretins and like dominance and submission, but it does, and it's just a beautiful change of pace. But then, before you know it, at the 1 minute 50-second mark, the guitar finally comes in with this absolutely powerful, triumphant riff. It's very simple, but it brings a lot of weight to the track. And the hey shouts in the background that the band sings there, really powerful. And then the vocals kick in again, and it's just like a powerful reprise of the more laid back original section of the song. Such a fantastic melody, such a great, powerful moment. Then, the song kicks back into the beautiful piano-driven melody, and we get like kind of the song going through the same pattern there, but an amazing guitar solo comes out later before the vocals come back, and it's just, oh man, just so excellent. But then before you know it, my favorite part of the song kicks in. We get into this quiet section, really driven by Buck Dharma's guitar playing, and some great bass as well. You don't really know where the song's going. It's kind of this weird kind of quiet section before the end, but then it erupts into the amazing outro of the song, where the whole band is just singing Astronomy with that, that uplifting riff that appeared a few times throughout the track. But this one here is just so much more powerful. The keys in the background giving it this symphonic edge, and the guitar is just absolutely singing, ending off this track. It's just screaming into the heavens, and it's just such a great tune, guys. Honestly, like, I'm tempted to give it a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to stick with a 9.5. But it's on, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect song. It's one of the best hard rock songs I ever heard. So fuck the 9.5. I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. Just perfect way to close the album. And a stellar song. Absolutely stellar. And I can't say enough about the last two tracks on this one, guys. Really just some of the best rock music you can ever imagine. And the rest of the album's fantastic as well. So that's Secret Treaties, guys. Very hard to review this one because they have such a unique sound. But those last two songs, let me tell you guys, worth the price of admission alone. Even if you don't like their more eccentric side on the first half of the album and the first two songs on side 2, you're going to love the album for these two tracks because they're very easy to get into and very epic and melodic. So definitely, if you're a rock fan, you gotta get Secret Treaties, guys. You absolutely have to. But you know what? Don't go into it expecting like a proto metal, like Black Sabbath, Sir Lord Baltimore, Lucifer's Friend, something like that. This one here, it's a little bit different, but I think you guys are gonna love it just the same. So Secret Treaties, can't recommend it enough. Can't wait to get into more Blue Oyster Cult. Again, comment below, tell me which one I should check out next. Should I go forward to the album with Don't Fear the Reaper, or should I go back and listen to their first few things? Now that I mentioned it, I'm probably going to upload this months after I record it, so hopefully by then I'll have made a decision, but if not, comment down below. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Always appreciate you watching, and take care.